Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. Now, friends, if you are working at your corporate 9-to-5 job and hating life and listening to this podcast right now, oh my goodness, have I got a treat for you. You've maybe been thinking about starting your own business, and maybe fear has been holding you back, or you're just thinking, oh, that's super complicated. There's no way I could ever do this. Aha! We have the serum for you and the expert. His name is Trevor Blake. He's written a book that is going to simplify all these things. We're going to break it down in today's episode as well. He's a serial entrepreneur who's built and sold 3 companies for $300 million since 2003. He's also currently building and managing 2 more businesses focused on developing treatments for the most aggressive forms of cancer. He's a New York Times bestselling author, an award-winning screenplay writer, and he's a happily married, 36 years strong, Liverpudlian, now living in California and Seattle. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Trevor Blake. Hey, Trevor.
Hi, Mary.
I am so glad you're here. And I also just want to point out for the record, it makes me chuckle, the fact that you are a Brit living in the US and I am an American living in the UK, and we're having this conversation today. How great is technology, eh?
Well, that's what it's all about. And that's really what the book, my first book, 3 Simple Steps, and my current book, Secrets to a Successful Startup, is all about. It's about how it's simplifying your life. So, I mean, I think you and I could actually make this podcast last 4 or 5 hours because we're both on the same page as far as making things simple. Well, I mean, that introduction makes it seem really busy, but it's actually the opposite.
It really is. And maybe we need to invite you back for part 2 and part 3 another day. But let's focus in and talk about specifically how to launch a startup the simple way. Because I think so many people have this dream in the back of their mind of like, oh, I really want to start this company, or I really want to follow this kind of dream. But then it never happens because they go, oh my God, I don't even know where to begin. Why do you think is the best time to start your own business, like right now?
Well, I've always thought there's never a bad time to start a company. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just start and figure it out as you go along. Yeah. But we're at the beginning of a new industrial revolution, and I think this one will disrupt lifestyle as much as the one in 1740 disrupted the village-centric lifestyle and forced everybody to commute to the machine, if you like. Yeah. We're in a fantastic age where technology allows us to go back to that village-centric lifestyle and pretty much work from home or work from a local office and immediately engage the world. But previously, it took a long time to build a business. You had to start locally and build a sort of a local following, and then you could go regional, and then you could go national. And probably most people never even thought of going global. I mean, today you can actually start a business and you can go global immediately.
Well, I mean, I'm case in point, they're right there for you. I started the Simplifiers back in 2003 in Austin, Texas. And way back when, and I know my listeners, some of them know this story already, I started it as an events management agency. So that was the ultimate local business, knowing your local vendors, knowing your local people. Flash forward 16 years later, I am halfway across the planet. 90% of my clients are based in America and in Canada. And, business as usual. And that's the secret, right?
Well, it's part of the secret. I think the biggest secret, somebody told me many years ago when I was invited to dinner and I was waxing lyrical about my brilliant business plan. That was my first company. Yeah. And he had built several successful companies, including Amgen, built it to $60 billion, very smart man. And he held up his hand and he said, look, you talked to me like I was a child. Now, look, you don't know what business you're in until you get into business. Yeah. You just start and you figure it out from there. And I didn't really understand what he meant until I did just decide, okay, I'm going to go for it. And I thought I was getting into one particular business with my brilliant idea. And then when I got in the business, an opportunity appeared in front of me. I would never have known about it if I hadn't started. And I ended up going in a completely different direction and thankfully, successfully too. So for most people, or for all people, I would say, stop thinking about it and just do it.
Yeah.
The key thing is before you get to that point, you're in a very fortunate position because you haven't come up with your brilliant idea yet. I think one of the things that makes a big difference between a company that succeeds and ones that just sort of floats along doing an average amount of revenue is the brilliant idea, that winning idea. And there's a method for capturing that winning idea that's in the book, Secrets to a Successful Startup. That's where I start. I start before the startup, if you like. Yeah. So you have to come up with something that isn't. I work with a lot of Chinese companies, and they have 3 categories of entrepreneur. They have the Me Too, the Me Better, and the Me First. You can't really succeed with the first 2. You've got to be a Me First. Yeah. You have to have differentiating aspect of your business that's going to disrupt all the other businesses around you. And so the winning idea is the best starting point. So if some of your listeners are in the phase of, I would love to start a company, but I don't know where to start, then using tools and techniques that can help you have a brilliant winning idea is the best place to start, because then the company sort of builds itself for you.
Well, and I really appreciated the fact that your book breaks it down into 3 key phases. So when you're launching a new business, there's the starting phase, but then there's the surviving phase, and then thriving. So I'm going to want to break down each one of those sections, do kind of a little high-level conversation on each, and go from there. One of the things that I really stuck out at me, and I've heard this before, and I know it's true, but I know so many people do the exact opposite, is rather than chasing after what your passion is and what you're excited about is and what your talents are, what instead should you be asking when you launch your business or come up with your $1 million idea?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Every successful entrepreneur that I've met or know currently didn't really, and I include myself in that, didn't really set out to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
They found something that got under their skin. It annoyed them. And they set about fixing it, even though they had no clue where to start or what to do. But you set about fixing it, and you become an entrepreneur by default, because you set out to fix an issue or to create something that doesn't exist or improve something that, there's lots of fantastic examples. We have Netflix now because the guy who owns Netflix or started Netflix went to Blockbuster and got charged a fee because he didn't rewind his video and he was late back. And so he wanted to have a different model whereby you can take a video and you can keep it as long as you want, pay a fee. Yeah. That one little idea, put Blockbuster out of business.
Yeah.
Or you think of something like Sarah Blakely, her company Spanx. She was really irritated by the little seam in the toe of pantyhose that, in certain shoes was really painful. And so she was always cutting it off, and she found a lot of her friends were cutting off. I'm sounding like I know way too much about pantyhose, but it's because I've read her biography. That's how. And so she secretly and quietly started her company that way. It's a brilliant idea that nobody else had, and she was fixing a problem. And out of that comes this great empire and inspirational story of how to start a company. I mean, she's one of my, one of the people that inspires me, really.
Yeah. And so you specifically point blank say, instead of focusing on what you're really good at or your passion or building a business around your hobby, you start by asking the question, what frustrates you? What drives you crazy in your everyday life or work or what have you? And there is where the business is, right?
Well, there is a business. You just have to start, just figure it out. The one thing you can do is to start making notes about the sort of things that, when you're sitting around and say, that really makes me mad, I wish someone would do something about that. Yes. You'll form a pattern. And after that, it's your passion and talent that comes through. And you can, I believe any entrepreneur can build any business. Mm-hmm. You need the passion and you need the fire in your belly and all the rest of it. It doesn't really matter what the business is. I mean, the 5 businesses, I've sold 3, as you mentioned at the beginning, but I still have 2 I'm running right now. All 5 businesses were started the same way, something that I felt shouldn't happen or something that should happen. Yeah. And I set about it. And in none of those cases was I'm a sales and marketing guy. I have no qualifications to build any of the businesses that I have built. Mm-hmm. But you figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and that's truth. I mean, repetition builds mastery. For me, at least, it's the whole Malcolm Gladwell thing, 10,000 hours invested in, you become better at doing the thing. So, what I'm curious about, though, is this. I feel in my 16 years of being an entrepreneur, which, side note, my parents are entrepreneurs as well, so I've been entrenched in this 42 years now. But there is a difference between building a business that you're going to scale and grow and then eventually sell, but then building a business that is a lifestyle business as well. Can you talk us through the differences of that?
Yeah, I think it's personal choice. I think you have to know who you are as a personality. Yeah. My personality is a builder. I get bored very quickly. That's my Achilles heel. And so when I've built a business to a certain size, and now it's getting to the point where it's more a maintenance role. I'm not the best person in the seat for that. So that's when I decided it's time to exit. And there's people smarter than me and a better resource than me who can then take it to the next level.
Yeah.
It's just a personal thing. But it doesn't matter whether you start one company and it's your business for the rest of your life, or whether you do 20 companies. The principles are the same throughout. The principles of how to come up with the idea, how to start, how to survive long enough to hit a home run, and then how to thrive. These are the same whether it's one company or, in my case, 5.
But what I also find as well is that when you're building a business that you want to grow and scale, and let's say it has a lot of upfront expenses and costs, like say you're building an app or a brand new bit of software or manufacturing something new, it really does require that investor role in there. Where other times, not all times, but other times for a lifestyle business, there's very little startup costs, so you're not really going down that path of finding an investor and building capital. You're just bootstrapping and going along. Do you see that as well?
Well, that's how I started. My first company, I started with $200.
Yeah.
And it sounds crazy, but actually, like all things, necessity is the mother of invention. Because I had no more money to employ anybody or to build anything, I came up with a business model that could work on very little capital. And it was a unique idea at its time, and people thought it was crazy. I think most people probably still do think it's crazy, but I've proven it 5 times. At some point, someone's going to believe me.
Yeah.
And so at the very beginning, how you structure your business or your venture, whether it's in commerce or arts, it doesn't really matter, same principles. How you structure at the very beginning allows you to maximize what you can do with that small amount of cash, because it's all about cash flow in the end. Everybody knows this, everybody talks about it, but most people screw up the same way. They spend too much up front, and they spend it on the wrong. In my opinion, they spend it on some of the wrong things. So you can make a very little amount of cash go a long way. I mean, I'm living proof of that. With the other companies, obviously, I was in a much better financial position, but I didn't throw money at any of these companies. I started very small, because you don't really know at the beginning in which direction you're going to go. And you could throw a ton of money at building inventory or hiring employees or getting a fancy office in town or something, and then find out actually the opportunities in a slightly different direction, and you didn't need to spend all that money.
Right.
So I'm a great believer in going gently at the beginning rather than doing it. I do also believe in investors, though, regardless of your company, regardless of its mission. And I am an investor in a number of companies, but the reason I always bring investors in as soon as I can, simply because they bring so much more than money. It's not really about the money. I would rather own 10% of 100 million than 100% of nothing. Yeah, and that's my sort of principle. But you can get from nothing to 100 million very quickly with the help of investors, and then go off and do something similar or something different with your own capital. But they bring in all kinds of connections, all kinds of experience, and opportunities you wouldn't otherwise see. And their experience can really stop you from tripping up in the early phase, the startup phase. Right. So I like to bring in investors if they're available, but it's, if you go out looking for investors, it can be a very painful process. But if they're there and ready, and it can be angel investors, it could be family, friends, or, you can't have too much cash at the beginning. And if you find you didn't need that money, you can always give it back. Yeah.
Well, I think you're dead on with when you tap into investors, or even if you don't go down the investor route and you just simply build yourself a board of advisors, you'll still be able to tap into their network, which may open up channels for possible collaborations with other vendors and suppliers that you come together, or open up doors to, do pitch meetings and kind of get in front of bigger clients that help you get that cash quickly. But before we dive into that, because I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, I apologize. I get so excited talking about this. You really stress in the book, and I 100% agree, that if you were to launch a business today, do not set it up as a sole proprietorship, but instead incorporate it as an LLC, or if you're in the UK, as a limited company. Why do you think that's so important?
Well, there's many reasons, but the 2 critical reasons are, one is mentality, and the other one is legal protection. So let's talk about the mentality, because I think it's much bigger and more important. There are so many great ideas that never see the light of day, and so one thing that I'm big on, and I do it myself all the time, is if I'm out walking and I suddenly get smacked in the forehead with this great idea. If I don't do something, I call it reacting forward. If I don't react forward with that idea, then it typically fades very quickly as the world, comes and encroaches, and you stop thinking about it, and other things take priority. So what I always recommend is, when you come up with what you think is a winning idea, you incorporate it immediately. And it sounds very dramatic, but incorporation is so easy. It's like 4 clicks of a mouse on the internet.
Yeah.
But what it does for you is that, a few days later you get a package in the mail, and it has the name of the company. Doesn't matter what the name you've picked, the name of the company, and it has your name as Mary or Trevor, CEO.
Yeah.
And that gives you this huge boost, a real mental, powerful energy boost. And the thing to do with that then is you photocopy it 1,000 times and you stick it everywhere. And you put it in your pocket and you put it in the car and you sneakily put it in a drawer if you're still working in an office or something. And what you do is you see it every day. And by seeing it every day, it forces you to think about this company you've just created, even though just a little while ago it was just an idea you had while walking the dogs. Now it's real. And the more real it feels, the more ideas about what it would look like, who your customers would be, how the marketing plan would be formed, all that starts to form naturally. But if you don't make that first step, it goes away. So when I had my first big idea, I incorporated it as TGB International. That was my initials. TGB International never came to fruition because I changed the name when I went in a different direction to Quality of Life Medical. So it doesn't matter what you call it or anything, but seeing my name as a business owner, which, that just has this huge boost. The second thing is the legal aspect of it, because if you don't incorporate, then, if something bad happens and you get sued, you can get sued not just for your business mistake, but you get sued right through they can take everything. They can take all of your possessions, including your house.
Yes.
Whereas if you incorporate, you're only limited to the money that you've invested in the corporation.
Yeah.
And it's very simple. In America, we do limited liability companies, LLCs, and in England they do limited companies.
Yep.
So and that's all you have to do, and it costs probably here it costs $100, there probably £100.
Yeah.
And you're up and running, and you're protected.
And if you're going, oh my God, you already lost me, Trevor. It's too much. It's too big. I mean, again, just Google it. You put right into Google. Google is the master of most things. How to incorporate a company in your state, California, Texas. Yeah.
That's why I wrote the book, Secrets to a Successful Startup.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do any of that. You just follow the instructions in the book. It's very easy and just 1, 2, 3, done.
Yes.
And it takes away all the mystery. The reason I wrote the book is because being in a startup can seem quite mystifying until you actually start. And so the book demystifies it all. It's just a plan. Just follow the plan, and you'll do all this.
Yeah. So again, part 1 is starting, and that's the incorporating. That is figuring out what the major frustration and pain point is out in the world, and figuring out your idea, the solution to that pain point, what product or service that you can provide that people will want to open their wallet and buy. So after that, it's drafting up a business plan. And this is where I think a lot of people start to go, oh my God, Trevor, 200 pages, I'll never get through it. It's never happening. Give up, watch Netflix instead. Do you have any ideas or simple tips on tackling the business plan?
Yeah, and it's written out in depth and fully demystified, because it is a daunting prospect. And I know I felt that myself when investors have said, can we get your business plan? And I didn't actually have one.
Yeah.
And so, if you can't get it down on one page, forget it.
Yeah.
No investor, no vendor, no customer is going to read more than one page of a business plan without putting a gun to their heads, because they are dull things. The purpose of a business plan, but you still have to do the business plan. And the purpose of the business plan is not for them, and it's not for you. It's for understanding the business that you're about to be in. And so what I recommend is a business plan that's totally focused on customers and vendors. So it means, and this sounds simple, but so many entrepreneurs that I meet, they're terrified of leaving their desk and going and talking to people. Well, you've got to get out and go and talk to potential customers. There's loads of different ways of doing it, trade shows or surveys or all kinds of things. And the internet provides all kinds of tools that help too. So you have to get out and you have to talk to your potential customers and find out what they like about the competition, what they don't like about the potential competition, what they think of your idea for a product, and get honest feedback. That's what the business plan really is. And there's a number of investors, and I quote some in Secrets to a Successful Startup, who say, if they get a business plan and it doesn't have the largest part of it being, customer feedback, vendor opinion, competitive analysis, it goes in the bin. And that's the key thing. But the reason is that you want to really know your business. So I consider it not a plan, as more of a process. Yeah. And it's not a one-time thing. I do my business plan process, which I end up with one piece of paper, but I go through the full process every year for my companies. Yeah. Because it's so much you can't see and you don't know, and until you do it, I've been saved from disaster by doing it a few times when I found out competitors had brought a product that I didn't know existed that threatened my particular area of expertise. So there's nothing to be daunted by. I find it a very pleasurable, fun thing to do because you end up doing more of this. Basically, you can talk to your customer over the Skype, and people are more honest on the internet than they are face to face.
Yeah, right. Well,
So
and
you get real feedback.
yeah, and I think that that's incredibly important because what frustrates you, you have to validate is actually frustrating your potential clients and frustrating them to the point that, again, they open their wallet and are happy to pay you the money for your product or service. Trevor, I'm curious if you have run across this tool. This is one that I give to my clients when they say, business plan, no way. There's no way I can just sit down and write out 200 pages, is actually having them fill out a business model canvas. Have you stumbled upon that yet? It's brilliant.
I have a one-page business plan too. There's a template.
Yeah.
Mark Allen has a one-page business plan template. And they're free and they're out there, so it's very easy to do. But you can't avoid the step of talking to potential customers.
100% agree. Yeah.
Even if you don't write it down who wants a 200-page anything? But even if you don't write it down, it's got to go in there.
Yeah.
You still have to do the process. Even if out of it you just come up with a small piece of paper that has your main points.
Yeah.
It's not about the plan itself. So I hope if anyone's listening to this thinking that that's the most daunting aspect, and I know I'm preaching to the choir because you're all about simplification, but an effective business plan is a really simple document.
Yeah.
But in the brain to get to that simple document is all this information you've collected.
Right. And that's it. You have to get it out of the brain onto a page so that you can start seeing the trees from the weeds, and making educated guesses towards the next proposition that you put out there and testing those products and services. So just to let you guys know, whoever's listening, I'll put a link in the show notes for the business model canvas template. So if you guys wanted to check that out, again, it builds upon what Trevor's talking about in his book and helps you get started. That's the big thing, is get started and get past the fear. Reminder, show notes are at thesimplifierspodcast.com. So moving on to stage 2, which you call surviving. And, we alluded to it earlier, but what do you feel is the one most common mistake that more than 80% of startups make?
Well, Mary, it's not just startups, it's all businesses of all sizes. And you only have to go down the high street to see the effects of making this one mistake. And it's always cash flow, cash flow management. And cash, as people say cash is king, but cash and cash flow are two completely different concepts. And so people really don't, when they go into business, a lot of people have come from the corporation or the home, been a homemaker and starting a company, something like that. And we're trained to manage expenses and budgets, but we're not trained in cash flow. How does money flow through a business? And it's not something you want to learn by experience. You really don't want to have the experience of difficult cash flow. So you need to understand it. It's in my book, outlined very clearly what to do about it. But the concept basically is, I'm sure a lot of your clients are sort of either online or in high street sort of businesses, fashion and retail.
Yeah.
It's really hard today to manage inventory in those businesses because people can go online and order 20 shirts of different sizes and then send 19 back and just keep one and not pay for shipping and handling in many cases. And so managing inventory so that you don't have too much inventory on hand that you can never sell that goes out of fashion or something like that. Those type of issues are what cash flow is all about. And so it requires a great deal of thought and planning to make sure that you have sufficient capital in the event of you can pick 4 or 5 things that could put a company out of business, and you must be able to survive all of those 4 or 5 things. So if you look at your competitors who no longer exist and you say, okay, what did they do that put them out of business?
Yep.
And you make sure that you have the systems and the people and the capital or access to capital when it's needed through business loans or something like that, or equipment loans. If you set yourself up in anticipation of potential problems, then you can survive this period. It's a very bumpy period. Startup is exhilarating. It gives you a sense of awe and flow, and it's just so exciting. Yeah. And then you hit a road bump. Yeah. And when you hit the first road bump, you're in the survival mode. And then there's 2 or 3 or 4, and you get through that, and then you get back to that sense of awe and flow. But you have to build the company. So Secrets to a Successful Startup focuses particularly on company structure.
Yeah.
One of the mistakes that most companies make, particularly today, is that they still follow the traditional structure of a company, which is a hierarchy. The guy at the top, and then his underlings, and underlings hire underlings, and underlings hire managers, and managers hire workers, and all the rest of it. If you start with that type of structure, then these days you're pretty much doomed to fail, I believe.
Yeah, because
so you have to have
expensive and gloat. There's so much gloat to having payroll, and you're building a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger hamster wheel to have to pay, and that is not what you want, especially at the beginning of starting a new company, right?
Right, and so in all of my 5 companies, I've never hired a single employee. Not one employee in any of the 5. And people find that really hard to understand or believe. But I've always taken the concept that, when you buy a new house, you don't hire a full-time handyman to live in one of the spare bedrooms just in case something goes wrong. You bring him in when he's needed. But if you are successful and you own 20 houses, now it makes sense to hire a full-time handyman. And so you have the same concept with the startup. So when you're in the startup phase and the survival phase, the structure of the company is very important. So the model that I've used that's been very successful is also very profitable. So as an example, my first company, just before I sold it, it was doing 15 million in revenue a year, but it was making 76% net profits without a single employee on board and no office building. So working from home. I call it the opportunity for the new home-based multimillionaires. People still think of home-based businesses as mom and pop stores, and they're not anymore. That you can get financial independence incredibly quickly these days, and so you can build big fast, basically. But the way you build is important. So I use a hub model, basically using vendor contracts rather than employees. And what I end up finding is that the company runs itself pretty much. And my only role is to stop interfering with people and let them get on with their jobs.
Right.
So it's a beautiful business.
So if your vendors are contractors and they're delivering various aspects of your business, so we're talking manufacturing, marketing, sales, are there other aspects I'm not thinking of right now?
Well, there are in mine because I'm in a highly regulated industry. So I have regulatory quality control, quality assurance, but you also I have a contracted accounting, contracting finance, all of that, everything, every aspect of the business. I use through a contracting model rather than an employee model. And there's many reasons to do it, not just profit. The other reason is that as an entrepreneur, you don't want to be spending 75% of your time holding people's hands and feeling like I feel like Father Confessor when I had in my regular job in the corporate world. 75% of my time was sat in meetings or trying to make employees feel better about them giving me the honor of working for me.
Right.
So you don't want that. You want to grow the business. So if you have the hub model for a period of time, through the survival period, it frees you up to grow your business, to do the fun stuff.
And that's the truth. I mean, because a lot of times for small businesses when they're launching, whether they've got just a tiny pot of savings that they're launching it by themselves or a bit of investment, more than likely, you're not going to have the capital to hire super experienced, talented people who come with a very expensive salary. You're hiring these young, green, maybe straight out of college people,
Absolutely.
and you're trying to train them to do the jobs that you need them to do. And I think that, Trevor, you're dead on, because I feel like in the last 5 years alone has revolutionized in businesses, because you now can hire very talented virtual assistants that can do the work 5 times faster than a green, full-time, straight out of college employee. And you're actually getting the expertise of that person too in that role. So the game has changed completely.
Absolutely. And because of that, the model needs to change too.
Yeah.
And that's why that's the main reason Secrets to a Successful Startup has come out now.
Yeah.
It's the right book at the right time.
Yeah.
I actually wrote it in 2012, but I didn't think I had 5 offers for it, but it just wasn't the right time to bring it out. But this is definitely the right time. And I'm proof of it, I suppose. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So this is one thing. But I'm also working with a number of other small companies. They've got 1 or 2 people, but pretty much partnerships type of thing.
Yeah.
And they have adopted the same model, and they are loving it, not just because the business is successful and they're surviving through the cash flow period, but they've got so much time for themselves to grow the business, but also to live a balanced life.
Yeah.
And it is, I don't think those two things should be mutually exclusive. I think if you have a happy, balanced life, then you typically have a happy, balanced business, and vice versa.
Well, again, living proof over here as well. Again, preaching to the choir, because 2012, you would have seen me in a very fancy, very expensive office with a brick and mortar in the front and the beautiful sign, Simplifiers and all that. A very big team. And, people on payroll and insurance and benefits and all the stuff, right? Which, again, 2012 certainly was how we ran businesses back then.
Absolutely.
But here, recording this in January of 2020, it's a whole different world. So why do you think women run and women-led businesses tend to be more successful than ones led by men? Controversial, Trevor. Tell us more.
Not controversial to me because, it's my opinion and it's also my experience.
Yeah.
But that's the opinion of one man. That's like a clinical trial of one patient. It's really not very valuable. So there's recently, the last 2 or 3 years, there's been loads of articles that have come out, and a simple Google search will find them for you. Just ask that question on Google, and you'll be fascinated. Big companies like Credit Suisse have done surveys that show not just subjectively, but objectively, how companies that are women run are more successful, more profitable, make quicker, better decisions, more optimal decisions, especially when there's conflicting interests involved, than men-led companies. And everyone then struggles to say, well, what's the reason why? And no one can really put their hands on the reason why that is. I believe it's women's intuition that is the most powerful attribute. I've spent my whole life trying to get just 1/10 of my wife's intuition. And if I could bottle women's intuition, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because I'd be a multi-billionaire. It's that powerful. And there are tools and techniques. You can get them online, you can get them in my courses or whatever, that allow us men to try and catch up and allow women to have more confidence in that talent. It really is a talent, it's an attribute. I believe it's that, so that if you're at the negotiating table, it doesn't matter if you're a woman, if you're a good negotiator or a bad negotiator, your instincts are telling you everything you need to know about the person opposite the table. But if I'm a man, I've been taught to use skills, and I think I'm so clever. You're trying to get to a win-win and all this nonsense and everything. I do think intuition is a key attribute. It gives women a huge advantage in business.
Well, I certainly can think about many times where I've sat in sales or pitch meetings, and a red flag pops up, and I go, ooh, this isn't the right client for us. And I'll actually turn down the piece of business, because I knew, instead of taking the piece and, having the windfall of the money, that long term it was not a good match for our company, our portfolio, my team, and on the stress that would go on. So I think you're right. I think intuition is a huge part of seeing and having that gut check moment of what opportunities are a match and aligned with where you're headed, and which ones to say no to. And that also goes to your vendor supplier selection as well.
Absolutely.
100%.
And with vendors, it's a key thing, because it's not about getting the cheapest vendor, it's about getting the best one for you. Even if it costs more in the beginning, it'll cost you a lot less over the long run, because you won't have all the issues. In my corporate life, whenever I built teams, and I know this is politically incorrect to say, but I always strove to get a 50-50 balanced male and female. And that's because in my regular working career, I worked in an all-female department. It was a nightmare. I worked in an all-male department. It was a bigger nightmare. But when I've worked in 50-50, it's been an absolute treat. It's been so much fun. And you get the right mixture of analysis and intuition. And I think it works really well. But when you're an entrepreneur by yourself, you have to sort of do both inside your head. So you have to work on your intuition and your analytical skills. And there's ways to do that. But I encourage, I don't know if many men listen to your podcast, but if they are, I encourage them to go seek sources of information that can help work on the intuition. And there are some tools and techniques that you can find on my website anyway that can help you do that. Yeah,
and we'll put a link in the show notes back to Trevor's website and his book and all the good stuff, so you guys can check that out. So you mentioned something a little bit earlier, and I want to bring back to the front and really start to dive into what and how. I know in this day and age, there is a lot of hype in social media and just sort of in pop culture in general of this sort of hustle and grind mentality, like go, 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 do all the things, go work 18 hours a day. And, no, you're not going to see your spouse or your kids. Like, you just got to put in lots of hours and really crank out all the things, right? And yes, that is one way of running a business, and that is one way of living a life. I don't subscribe to it. You don't subscribe to it, it sounds like. You really work a 3 to 5 hour workday. So tell us, how does somebody make that work and still have a successful, profitable business in your mind?
Well, it's not the craziness that people think it is, because all the science and surveys show that in the regular corporate environment, when someone's working a 9-hour day, they only really put in about 2 hours and 53 minutes of real productivity, real work. The rest of the time is, sitting in mindless meetings or around the coffee cooler or playing on the internet, looking for a better job or something. And there's a reason for that, because all of those social interactions allow you to work that 2 hours and 53 minutes effectively. Yeah. You need both. You need the work period and you need the distraction period. Yeah. All of the latest studies from neurology show that it's impossible to work 8 or 9 hours in a stretch. Some say it's impossible to concentrate for more than 10 minutes. Some say 2 hours, but I've not read anything that says more than 2 hours. Yeah. And what happens to the brain, I'm very into peak performance of the brain. So what happens is, the brain peaks and then it drops really quickly after that, after about 20 minutes. But after 2 hours, basically you're wasting your time continuing to work. This is critical to the entrepreneur, especially one that works from home or someone working by themselves, because burnout is a real issue. Because when I started my first company, I didn't know any of this, and so I was sat in front of my computer waiting for an email to come through, waiting for the telephone to ring, and I felt terribly guilty if I left my office and dared to go into the kitchen and get a sandwich or something like that. I felt I must be doing something wrong. Right. So that's when I started to research about all this sort of thing, and it turns out that the opposite is true. That whilst you can sit and analyze and do some intensive work for, say, up to 2 hours, when you leave that and you go and do something completely different that's relaxing, go and read a book or go and have lunch with a friend or a partner, or go for a walk. That's my favorite, just go for a walk. As I'm going for a walk, this brilliant solution would just smack me in the forehead, and I just wasted 2 hours trying to crack it, and it appeared to me out of nowhere. Yeah. And that happens all the time. And so I started to develop a system whereby you need a lot of discipline for this, but whereby I treated the distraction periods with the same dedication as I treated the working periods. And so I set a calendar around that, so no one can disturb me when I'm going for a walk. So my alarm goes, time to get out of the office, take my dogs for a walk, leave my phone in the office. Even if I'm talking to someone on the phone, I will put the phone outside, I've got to go. I'll put the phone down. That's as important as the actual thing. And so I learned to do that. And then I found that 5 hours was probably plenty for 5 hours was way too much, actually, because I was able to run 3 businesses at the same time and write a screenplay and, take my dogs for walks and everything, and all within this time period. Yeah. So I recommend the 5 hour working day. 5 hours is probably too much for most people, I would think, if they just have the one company. But the secret to it is to split it up during the day into dedicated work periods, dedicated relaxation periods, because it's in the relaxation where the magic happens. And that's how I've lived. I've lived my life since I discovered this, probably around 2003 or something like that. Yeah. That's how I've lived and run my companies. And the benefit of it all is the companies are successful. I'm relaxed. I'm not burnt out. But I have a balanced life. I can spend that time with my wife, with my dogs, with friends, or whatever I want to do, or watching soccer on TV, because the time difference allows me to watch it at 12 o'clock noon here, which is one of my passions. Yeah. So it works out perfectly.
So incredibly important. And what I hear you say there is being intentional about your downtime, just as important as your scheduled calls or team meetings or, sales pitches and things like that. So being intentional, time blocking that out into your calendar as a non-negotiable, not as a, would it be nice to go walk my dog today, but it is just as important with everything else, right?
It is, and that's well summarized. And I get passionate about this, so I tend to over talk a little bit. Yeah. You summarized that really well. The key thing, though, is discipline. And so I'm not naturally disciplined. And I don't think many people are, actually. I think it's something we learn. So the wonderful thing about our age is the internet provides fantastic time management tools, like these online calendars where you can block out your quiet times, your downtimes. So no one tries to disturb you during those things. All of those tools are now available to us, whereas when I first started this, it was pen and paper. Right.
And so that's what I use. So I have Google Calendar, and literally everything it exists in Google Calendar. If it isn't on Google Calendar, it doesn't exist in my reality. But it's linked into my scheduler tools. So I use a tool called Once Hub. I'll put all these links in the show notes for people. So Once Hub talks to Google Calendar, and so no one can ever book in time for my downtime. And, you know, I put that buffer in as well. So there are technology out there, and it's very simple to set up and not too expensive either. I mean, I'm talking maybe $20 a month, a subscription fee for those two tools to talk to each other. And that's it. And you're building yourself up for success rather than striving and, chasing after and working more. Because if I put more hours in, or if I surf the social media for 8 hours a day, surely that will result in more sales, which we all know is false.
It is false, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are working long, hard hours and are desperate to change that structure. And you know, there's plenty of tools out there to help you do it. There's a freebie on my website. You can download it. It's a 27-page, The Practical Magic of the 5-Hour Workday. So it's free. Take it and start using the tools, and you'll benefit from it immediately. You have to experience it to understand the benefit. That's the thing. So I recommend to people who are a bit cynical about it, try it for a few days.
Yeah, give it a week.
You won't go back. I guarantee you won't go back to the other way of working.
100% agree. I mean, I think roughly, I probably do 5 to 6 hour work days myself currently. And some days that I will do less. And of course, some days I will do more. But, it is possible to have a thriving business and not work yourself to the bone. So I want to move on to stage 3, which again is thriving. Tell us more about what the success mentality is in your mind.
Well, there is a success mentality, and I think we hear all these stories of people who get overnight success and they become depressed and the marriage breaks up and all these. I don't know how true any of the stories are, but I think if success comes too quickly and you're not prepared for it, it's likely to be fleeting. Yeah. So you can prepare yourself for the success that's going to come. If you follow secrets to a successful startup the right way, you've got a winning idea, you've incorporated it, you're building it out, you're using all the protection tools and the structures that are there, success is going to come. It's inevitable. But when your success comes, you want two things. You want to be able to hold on to it, but you also want to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And that's critical. That's not as easy as people might think. Success can be daunting because it brings into your life all kinds of other things too. Yeah. So you have to prepare yourself mentally. And the way I do that is because I grew up very poor in Liverpool. We were evicted from homes 3 times before I was 7. So it's hard to change your mentality. And then we lived in a derelict farmhouse all through my youth until I left home. Wow. It's hard to change that mentality of poverty unless you work on it and you find some tools. The tools I found were in autobiographies or biographies of other successful people who had overcome even worse things than that. That's not the worst thing in the world to overcome, but they'd overcome all kinds of disabilities and issues and challenges to be successful. So I simply copied them. Yeah. And then I realized that not many people were doing this. And so I've collated all that into sort of a millionaire mentality sort of thing. I mean, I'm using someone else's phraseology, but it incorporates thinking as if the success is already here. So if you project yourself forward to your successful business and you close your eyes and you start to imagine what that feels like, how am I behaving in this successful business? What does my business look like? What are my customers saying? What are the reviews like? And you start to imagine your success in the future has already arrived now. It changes behavior pattern. It changes your neural network. It's scientific. This isn't new age gobbledygook. So I present the science for it too. And so you start to mimic the behaviors of those that went before who were all brilliantly successful. Yeah. And people like Branson and all of you, Blakely we mentioned before, but all these brilliant people. And so you change your behavior slowly according to that. And as you change your behavior and your thinking, so your lifestyle changes. And before you know it, when success arrives, you're not excited, you're grateful.
Yeah, yeah.
And you just wish it hadn't taken quite so long.
And I certainly feel like it's a game changer because, and you talk about this in the book of like your RAS, your reticular activating system, the front part of your brain that is trying to filter through all the stuff and all the data points. And that, in reality, you only see, data points that prove whatever you believe is true. So if you have money mindset issues or blocks in that, you're going to find the data points that prove that, well, money is evil or money is dirty or money doesn't come to me, whatever. This is part of the process. I had heard once, and I thought this was so brilliant, in the art of negotiation, same as what you're saying. Imagine yourself already writing the acceptance speech or the winning speech after you've negotiated this big deal. I think it's the same as imagining yourself accepting the award and walking across stage and all of that. So that's the part of the process that sounds hokey, but it all comes down to your brain and your brain chemistry, that with repetition, you can get there as well.
Yeah, and so the reticular activation system is in the brainstem. So it's the reptilian part of the brain. Only us and reptiles have it.
Yeah,
and it basically is almost like a controller that stops trucks going too fast. I forget what they call that thing, but trucks can't go over certain miles an hour. This rat here is trying to help you, but it's actually hindering you when you want to be someone different than where you are now.
Yeah.
If you're happy as you are now, you don't need to do anything. But if you want to, you want to disrupt the world and make an impact in some way with a successful business, then you have to change the information that goes into this little thing at the back of your neck that's holding you back. And so there's tools and techniques that I describe whereby you can mentally put yourself in different positions. And as soon as you do that, the RAS kicks in and it starts finding you something similar in your environment that you probably didn't notice before. We experience this every day when we see a friend says, "Oh, I've just bought a new car," that you've never even noticed existed before, and then the next day you see 20 of them on the road.
Right.
That's what happens. It's exactly the same principle. It's a scientific, long scientific process behind it, but that's exactly what's happening, and you're resetting neural pathways. And so, when I first started my first company, I was afraid to talk in terms of tens of thousands, and then very quickly I found when I started working on this, very quickly talking millions is no issue whatsoever. And now I talk in terms of tens of millions and hundreds of millions, like I used to talk about, something that was $500 or something. Right. And people who know me are quite put off by it, because it just seems to have arrived in my life. And but it's because I've mentally prepared myself for the day when that's. I think you also bring it quicker by doing it, but I've mentally prepared for it. So I don't, I don't hesitate to talk about selling companies for 300 million. That's just a number. Yeah. But when other people see that 300 million, they sit back and they go, "Oh my goodness, that's incredible." People even stop talking to me because of it, because they're intimidated by the number. Yeah. It happens, and but that's what you're doing. You're retraining your brain, basically.
That's bottom line. That is 100% it. You are retraining your brain. You're setting down new neural pathways, and you're allowing your brain to start to see opportunity in your existing environment. Your environment has probably stayed exactly the same, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, actually, I could do that," or "Oh, actually, I could collaborate with this person," or "Oh, actually, that could be the missing link for getting this business up and off the ground." Okay, I am just so thrilled about this book, and I really want people out there to know about it. So today, congratulations, you have birthed a book today. It is officially out there and in the world. It's called Secrets to a Successful Startup, a recession-proof guide to starting, surviving, and thriving in your own venture. So again, we'll put the link in the show notes for the book so people can check it out. And just a reminder, he also has supplemental online courses that go along with this. So you're not alone. You've got fully access to all of these tools and support to help you get this startup up and off the ground. One thing I do love, Trevor, and I want to make mention, is that a portion of your proceeds goes also to cancer R&D, which I just think is fantastic.
All of it.
All of it.
All of it, yeah. So anything I make through my books or my courses goes directly, and it doesn't go to a charity where it's paid for employees' expense accounts or anything. Yeah. It goes directly into the lab at a non-profit company called Neovir, and it's, so every cent is used. And
incredible.
And it's just the right thing to do. Yeah. It's what we do.
Yeah, great. Well, so Trevor, just to wrap up, I've got a couple of questions I like to ask everybody that comes on the podcast. First and foremost, thank you so much for your time today. What is one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or poking holes and challenging your belief system?
Well, there are so many, because one of the habits of successful people is they read voraciously, of course.
Yes.
And I love biographies of all kinds. And because you've asked that question and you say, what am I reading currently? I just started Billy Connolly's biography, which is called Tall Tales and Wee Stories. Now, he might seem an unlikely character to be an inspirational figure, but I share a few things in common with him. He grew up in a tenement building in Scotland, and he's overcome all kinds of issues, including, education challenges and all the rest of it. to be one of the most inspiring speakers, joke tellers, wonderful storyteller, and screen star. And so I'm thoroughly enjoying his book. It's making me laugh out loud, but it's also very inspiring for me.
Fantastic. We'll put a link in the show notes for people if you guys want to check it out. So tell me, who is somebody in your inner circle or your network you just feel is up to brilliant things out in the world that we could shine a spotlight on them? And who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast.
Again, there are many, but my intuition says to recommend this latest one that I'm working with. Actually, I'm working in a sort of coaching, mentoring role. He's a guy who went through one of my courses. His name's Blake Bartholomew. So he went through one of my courses, and he got inspired to finally jump out of the corporate world, off the cliff into the world of being his own entrepreneur. And he and a couple of colleagues of his have developed the ability to use solar power to refrigerate and air condition in any hostile territory without the need for backup grid, so that medicines can be stored correctly in any part of the world, regardless of the territory. It's in its infancy. We have a prototype, and he's doing great work, and he's also fun to talk to because he's fresh from that experience of, oh my God, I'm going full in on this.
Brilliant. That sounds like somebody who's certainly seen a problem, created a solution, and is actually making a positive impact in the world.
He's actually experiencing the roller coaster ride right now of the first year in business. So it's fun. He's good to talk to. So I recommend that. His company is he's Solar X Works is a company.
Brilliant. We'll put a link in the show notes for Blake as well, and reach out to him. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what's one thing you're grateful for today?
My wife. That's totally honest, and that's all I can say, really. I mean, she's the biggest inspiration in my life. We've been married 36 years. We've known each other almost 40 years, actually. Yeah. My mother introduced me to her. My mother was dying of cancer. It was my turn to take her to the chemotherapy ward, and I almost knocked my wife over with the wheelchair. She was my mother's chemotherapy nurse. Wow. So that's how we met. But she's been a total inspiration for me through my life. And she has really powerful intuition too, which I envy, but try to steal little bits from her as well.
So I, again, recommend everybody check out this book if you are looking to launch a startup this year. This is the thing that will help you go step by step and figure it out and simplify it. Is there a place online that people can connect with you besides your website? Are you on Facebook or anywhere like that?
I'm only on Facebook.
Okay.
And there's some Facebook groups too for the 5-hour workday for some of my courses, transformation, etc. So you can find me on Facebook. I think it's just Trevor G. Blake on Facebook. And that's it. And then my website, of course.
Great. We'll put the links again in the show notes. So Trevor, here's my last question for you. And again, thank you so much for coming and making time for me today. So somebody somewhere in the world is listening to this episode right now and thinking, you know what? Actually, this is the year. I'm going to launch that crazy idea, that new startup. I'm going to do the thing. But she is very scared. What's one thing you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
There's never a wrong time to start, and it's never too late. Yeah. Absolutely. And I've whispered that in the ear of a 13-year-old who was working in a sweatshop who now runs her own dance troupe, and in the ear of an 87-year-old man who started his first company 2 years ago. He's now 89, and he's never had a better time in his life. So just start, and that's all you have to do.
Trevor, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. That was a pleasure. Thank you, Mary.